Today we're going to talk about the Golden Dome.
Geez, Trev, what's the Golden Dome?
I'm so glad you asked. The Golden Dome is basically the Iron Dome for the United States. It combines space sensors and interceptors along with ground missile defense batteries and other cool knick-knacky things in order to protect population centers in the domestic homeland from any sort of foreign missile attacks. Supporters of this thing say that China, Russia, North Korea, and other enemies of ours are really ramping up their attack capabilities, so we need to better defend ourselves. Critics say that, well, this is just a way for you to fill your billionaire buddies' pockets and assert control over the domestic homeland. And I wanted to take a little bit of a closer look into that. I got gray Zenzer instead of white. That's not what I wanted, but we're going to see if it works. Otherwise, I'm going to run out of the store and I'm doing this twice. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the domestic homeland has very rarely, if ever, really had any sort of missile threats or actual attacks. The Cold War is kind of the exception to that whole thing. When the administration launched this executive order in 2025, especially before we started having all these nitpicking fights with the international community, things were a little bit strange. And another strange part of it is just who stands to benefit and the think tanks that are behind it. I mean, someone who has been putting a lot of policy work and research into this is the American Enterprise Institute. And that name might not mean much to a lot of you, but to me it stands out a lot because they are pretty central to my other favorite project of Donald Trump's, which is the Freedom Cities. So, who stands to benefit? Let me use what's left of the white first before I move on to the gray, I think. But large defense contractors stand to benefit, of course, right? I mean, you have the same usual players in that mix, and that includes kind of the core group, like Lockheed Martin or Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and RTX, and they're going to be positioned more for like interceptor and radar and those kinds of contracts. But of course we have our new age defense tech firms as well, and that's going to be companies like everyone's favorite, Palantir and SpaceX, because why wouldn't we have Elon involved? And there's also a company called Anduril who stands to benefit. Now, Palantir, what they're good at is software and data fusion. Anduril is more for autonomy and sensors. And of course, SpaceX, that's launch baby. Now, everyone's favorite billionaire, Peter Thiel, is of course heavily involved with his capital funding firms. There's a little bit of gray in there. I'm painting it over anyway. We'll see if it works. And Mark Andreessen is just, unfortunately, someone that people don't really seem to know that well. But he's got his fingers in absolutely everything too, and he likes to jump around hand in hand with Peter Thiel, it seems like. He is a backer of Anduril, that company that I mentioned a second ago. These two are indirectly linked through their portfolio companies. And if you're familiar with me at all, you know that I'm very suspicious of these people, and for good reason, because the technocracy is a dystopian, cyberpunk, sci-fi type of fantasy threat that is actually a very real threat to you and to me. But overall, these tech billionaires are anticipated, and not just them, of course, the other companies behind this too, are anticipated to be receiving absolutely billions, hundreds of billions, if not exceeding $1 trillion in government contracts for this Golden Dome initiative. And why gold was chosen, it's hard to say for sure. It could be the money that is flowing into the pockets of these people, or it could just be as simple as Donald Trump's terrible taste in decor. The American Enterprise Institute is also heavily involved in the policy tracks of this project. They are also a firmly involved company with my other favorite project, which is the Freedom Cities. If you're not familiar with those, these are company towns, but they're urban districts. They're envisioned as manufacturing hubs and hubs for new technology, depending on who you ask, because depending on who else you ask, they could also be kind of the basis for this company town distribution of the new United States. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Sometimes I even catch myself going, wow, that feels like conspiracy, and then I remind myself that it's all in policy papers. It's still really early to try to say anything definitive about the Golden Dome because much of the conversation isn't happening until November of this year. But if the Golden Dome and Freedom Cities both advance, the United States could see a very layered self-defense and surveillance grid. And as part of the Freedom Cities on land, they really want to have these automated drone policing networks. Not joking. And in the sky, especially with this Golden Dome program, and of course with the drones, you would have expanded air defense and more surveillance. And in space, you would have interceptors and sensors overhead. But more importantly, as far as the space goes, there's nothing about an orbital strike and space deterrent system that can't also be weaponized. And that's important, I think, in the international context, not only because of what we are capable of or what that really means, but it also means that other countries are going to see this, and the United States can't be the only ones with orbital strike systems in space, so it's going to cause a military space race. And maybe that is inevitable. While nuclear weapons are banned in space through international conventions, conventional orbital weapon systems are not. And with everything going around the world right now, and if you look at kind of who we have aligned ourselves with officially and unofficially in the global scope of things and problems going on, do we really want to have orbital strike capabilities in this environment? Now, a missile doesn't need to come from the other side of the mountain when it can just come to the right of the moon. Went through the white way faster than I thought. So, right now this initial cost is slated to be only about $175 billion. I wish I had only about $175 billion. But analysts, including the American Enterprise Institute, are projecting it to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions. And that should surprise absolutely no one. And like I said, as far as risk to benefit goes, Homeland missile strikes are historically rare, and that's just an objective fact. And so I do tend to align myself with critics who just kind of point out that this is really more about domestic surveillance and expanding industry profits than it really has anything to do with actual defense. And again, like usual, I do want to highlight the concentration of power. Benefits flow narrowly to defense contractors, who are already the wealthiest individuals in the world. It's these venture-backed tech firms that are constantly pumping out policy ideas that simply aim to establish their own control, alienating democracies globally. I see no problem with this because they're both Zenzer bullseye. I just didn't even realize they made gray primer. But anyway, on the other side of that, beyond just the billionaires themselves, it's these obscure policy think tanks who are constantly backing these same projects, and I imagine probably funded by the same individuals. So my point here is that the Golden Dome is more than just a missile shield, and it's more than just a defense capability. What I know about it, Golden Dome is more than just a missile defense system. It is part of a broader network of projects that are combining military defense infrastructure with surveillance capabilities in the domestic United States. This is a continental system. The cost of these things at a minimum, without really knowing much more about it, is the dual use of the technology, with the offense and defense capabilities combined with the domestic implications, as well as the clear links to the same reoccurring private players, especially when those private players seem to be a part of this technocracy and keep speaking towards it. And I feel like it raises a critical question. Is this about protecting the United States from foreign threats? Or is this about embedding a permanent system of militarized control from land to orbit?